You're not even family. My brother's voice cut through the dining room like a knife. The whole table went silent. 24 years of pretending to belong, and there it was. The truth they'd all been thinking. I looked around at their faces, then smiled and said, "You're absolutely right. And that's exactly why you should be terrified. My name is Zoe, and I'm 27 years old. I was adopted when I was 3, and for the past 24 years, I've been living with a family that never let me forget I didn't belong. I work as a paralegal at a small law firm downtown, which my adoptive family loves to remind me isn't a real career like my siblings' jobs. Growing up, I was always the outsider looking in. Family photos where I stood slightly apart. Holiday traditions that somehow never quite included me the same way. Conversations that stopped when I entered the room. My adoptive parents, David and Margaret, had 2 biological kids already when they took me in, and they made sure I understood the hierarchy. My brother Jake and sister Emma were the real children. I was the project, the good deed, the reminder of their generosity that they could pull out whenever they needed to feel better about themselves. Every argument ended the same way. "You should be grateful we took you in." Every achievement I made was met with surprise, like they couldn't believe someone like me could accomplish anything worthwhile. I spent years trying to earn my place at their table, thinking that if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, proved myself enough, maybe they'd finally see me as their daughter. But some families are more interested in keeping you in your place than letting you rise to theirs. Hit subscribe if you know what it feels like to never quite belong, even in your own home. Maybe you weren't adopted, but I bet you know what it feels like to be the outsider in your own family. The conversation that changed everything started over Grandma Helen's will. She'd passed away 2 weeks earlier, and the whole family had gathered for Sunday dinner to discuss the inheritance. I should have known I wouldn't be included, but some stupid part of me still hoped. "So the lawyer called yesterday," Dad said, cutting into his roast beef. "Grandma left the house to be split between Jake and Emma, and there's about 50,000 in savings to divide." I looked up from my plate. What about me? The silence that followed felt like a physical weight pressing down on the room. "Well, you're not blood family, so..." Mom's voice trailed off like that explained everything. "I lived in that house every summer for 15 years, I said quietly. "Grandma taught me to bake in that kitchen. She helped me with my homework at that dining room table." Jake laughed, actually laughed. "Come on, Zoe. Grandma barely knew you anyway, you were just there because we were there." "That's not true." "It is true," Emma chimed in, not even looking at me. "She always said her real grandchildren would inherit everything. Blood is blood." I felt something crack inside my chest. "She never said that." "You should be grateful we took you in," Dad said, his voice getting that edge it always got when I pushed back. "Most kids in your situation don't get the opportunities we gave you." "My situation?" "You know what he means," Mom added. "We didn't have to adopt you, we chose to, that should be enough." I stared at them. These people who'd raised me, clothed me, fed me, and apparently kept a running tab of every single thing they'd ever done for me. The way they looked at me wasn't with love or even irritation. It was with the cold calculation of people who'd invested in something that hadn't paid off the way they'd hoped. "I'm being too sensitive, right?" I asked. "That's what you're going to say next." "Well," Jake shrugged. "You are being pretty dramatic about this." That's when I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. I wasn't their daughter. I was their charity case. And charity cases don't get to have feelings about being excluded from the family they thought they belonged to. The inheritance conversation was just the beginning. Once they'd established that I wasn't real family, it was like they'd given themselves permission to stop pretending I mattered at all. The first betrayal came 2 weeks later when I found out about the Christmas cards. Mom was at the kitchen table sorting through photos when I walked in. "Oh, Zoe?" she said, quickly shuffling some pictures into a pile. "I didn't hear you come in." I glanced at the photos she was trying to hide. They were all family pictures from Jake's wedding last year. But something was off. Then I realized what it was. I'd been cropped out of every single one. "Mom, what are you doing?" "Well, we're sending cards to extended family this year, and we thought it would be better to keep it to blood relatives only. You understand?" I picked up one of the cropped photos. There was Jake, Emma, Mom, and Dad smiling at the camera. You could see the edge of my blue dress where they'd cut me out, but that was it. 24 years of family photos, and they'd erased me like I'd never existed. "Blood relatives only," I repeated. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, sweetheart." The second betrayal hit even harder. I'd been struggling with my student loans for months, working extra hours at the firm to make payments. When I asked my parents for help, the same parents who'd paid for Jake's MBA and Emma's law school, their response was swift and brutal. "We already gave you a home for 18 years, Dad said over the phone. "We think you've received enough help from this family. Jake still lives in your basement, and you pay his car insurance. Jake is our son." The words hung in the air like poison. Jake is our son, not Jake and Zoe are our children. Just Jake. But the final betrayal was the one that broke something inside me permanently. I came home early from work one day to find Jake, Emma, and my parents huddled around the dining room table with papers spread everywhere. They went silent when they saw me. "What's going on?" I asked. "Nothing that concerns you," Emma said, gathering up the documents. But I'd seen enough. They were discussing Dad's business, the construction company he'd built from nothing, the company I'd helped with bookkeeping during college, the company whose success had paid for the house we all lived in. "Are you planning to sell?" I asked. "We're discussing succession planning," Dad said, "for when I retire. And I'm not part of that conversation because—" Jake actually rolled his eyes. "Because you're not family, Zoe. This is a family business." That night, lying in bed in the room they'd given me out of obligation rather than love, I made a decision that would change everything. I'd spent years trying to prove I belonged with them, but what if the real power came from accepting that I didn't? What they didn't know was that their outsider daughter had been paying very close attention to their family business. And some of the things I'd noticed weren't just unfair. They were illegal. What they didn't know was that working as a paralegal had taught me to pay attention to details they thought I'd never understand. While they saw me as just the adopted daughter playing at having a real job, I'd actually become very good at spotting financial irregularities and legal violations. All those years of helping Dad with his bookkeeping hadn't been wasted time. I'd seen the invoices that didn't match the work performed, the cash payments that never made it into the official records, the workers being paid under the table to avoid taxes, the safety violations that got covered up with bribes to inspectors. At the time, I thought it was just sloppy record keeping. Dad always said he wasn't good with paperwork, and I believed him. But my training at the firm had opened my eyes to what I'd really been looking at all those years. Tax evasion, fraud, worker exploitation, the kind of violations that could shut down a business and send people to prison. Those late-night phone calls Dad took in his office, the ones where he'd close the door and speak in hushed tones. I'd started paying attention to those too. Conversations about handling building inspectors, discussions about keeping certain employees off the books, plans to hide assets in accounts that didn't officially exist. The family that had spent 24 years reminding me I wasn't one of them had no idea that their unwanted daughter was sitting on enough evidence to destroy everything they'd built. Every document I'd filed away. Every conversation I'd overheard. Every discrepancy I'd quietly noted and forgotten. But I wasn't forgetting anymore. I was remembering everything, and I was starting to understand that sometimes the person they underestimate the most is the one who can hurt them the worst. The person who helped me see the truth was Patricia Kellerman, the senior partner at my law firm. She was in her 60s, sharp as a blade, and had a reputation for taking down corrupt businesses with surgical precision. I'd been working late one night, trying to distract myself from another family dinner disaster, when she found me in the conference room, surrounded by case files. "You look like someone who needs to talk," she said, settling into the chair across from me. So I told her everything: the adoption, the constant reminders that I didn't belong, the inheritance, the business discussions I was excluded from. When I mentioned Dad's construction company, and some of the things I'd seen over the years, her expression changed completely. "Zoe, do you realize what you're describing? Sloppy bookkeeping? Criminal activity, serious criminal activity." She helped me understand that all those years of feeling worthless had actually put me in a unique position. I had access to information that could bring down my adoptive father's entire operation. More importantly, I had the legal knowledge to know exactly what to do with it. "The question is," Patricia said, "what do you want to do about it?" While I was having this revelation, my family was getting more comfortable with treating me like dirt. They stopped including me in family group chats. They planned vacations without mentioning them to me. Jake started bringing his friends over and introducing me as the girl my parents took in instead of his sister. The breaking point came when I overheard Mom and Dad talking about officially removing me from their will and emergency contacts. "She's not really our daughter anyway," Mom said. "We should focus on our real children's futures." Dad was already drafting papers to exclude me from any claim to the house, the business, or their assets. They were planning to erase me legally the same way they'd already erased me emotionally. But they had no idea their fake daughter was building a case that could erase everything they cared about. Every piece of evidence, every witness statement, every financial record that would prove their guilt. They thought they were untouchable. I was about to prove them very, very wrong. What would you do if you discovered your family wasn't just cruel, but criminal? Because what I'm about to tell them will destroy everything they've built. The final confrontation happened 3 weeks later, right in their living room. I'd called a family meeting, something I'd never done before. They all gathered around like they were humoring a child, barely hiding their irritation at being inconvenienced. "What's this about, Zoe?" Dad asked, checking his watch. "We've got dinner reservations." "This is about your business," I said, setting a thick folder on the coffee table. Jake laughed. "What could you possibly know about Dad's business?" "More than you think." And I opened the folder and pulled out the first document, a photocopy of an invoice from 2019 that showed Dad charging the city $40,000 for materials that cost $8,000. "This is interesting," I said calmly. "Overcharging the city by 400%, that's fraud." Dad's face went pale. "Where did you get that?" "I've been helping with your bookkeeping for years, remember? You trusted me with everything because I wasn't really family, so I didn't matter." I pulled out the next document. Bank statements showing cash deposits that never appeared in the business records. And this is tax evasion. About $200,000 worth over the past 5 years. Mom stood up. "Zoe, you don't understand what you're looking at." "Actually, I understand perfectly. I'm a paralegal, remember? The job you all think is so beneath your real children." Emma tried to grab the folder, but I pulled it away. "Don't," I warned. "There's so much more. Worker safety violations that you bribed inspectors to ignore. Employees paid under the table to avoid taxes. Substandard materials used on city projects." "You're not even family," Jake snarled. "You can't do this to us." That's when I smiled. The same smile I'd been practicing in the mirror for weeks. "You're absolutely right. I'm not family, which means I have no reason to protect you." The room went dead silent. I could see the exact moment they realized what they'd done. All those years of reminding me I didn't belong. All those times they'd excluded me from family loyalty. All those moments they'd made sure I knew I was different. "I've already spoken to the district attorney's office," I continued. "They're very interested in what I have to say. Turns out, when you spend years telling someone they're not family, they stop feeling obligated to keep family secrets." Dad's voice was barely a whisper. "Zoe, we can work this out." "No," I said, standing up and gathering my evidence. "We really can't. Because you were right about one thing. I'm not your daughter. And daughters protect their families. But strangers? Strangers have no problem watching you burn." 6 months later, I'm sitting in my new apartment across town, reading about Dad's construction company in the newspaper. "Local business owner faces federal charges," reads the headline. The investigation I triggered led to a complete audit of his operations. Turns out, the evidence I'd gathered was just the tip of the iceberg. Jake and Emma tried calling me dozens of times after that night, begging me to reconsider, promising they'd treat me like real family if I just dropped the charges. Too little, too late. The damage was already done, and honestly, I didn't want to be part of their family anymore anyway. Patricia promoted me to senior paralegal last month. She says I have a natural talent for investigation and a strong moral compass. Funny how the family that never saw my worth couldn't stop talented people from recognizing it immediately. Dad's business is gone. The house they were so proud of is up for sale to pay legal fees. Mom stopped posting those blood family-only Christmas cards because there's nothing left to celebrate. Meanwhile, I've never been happier. I've got real friends now, people who chose to be in my life because they actually like me, not because they feel obligated to keep me around. They spent 24 years reminding me I wasn't family. Turns out that was the best gift they ever gave me. Family isn't just about blood, it's about respect and love, which my adoptive family never understood. Comment below if you've ever been made to feel like an outsider in your own home, because you're not alone in that experience. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength when family fails you. Remember, sometimes the family that rejects you is doing you the biggest favor of your life. On your screen, 2 stories are calling you. Click and watch them now. Each one more gripping than the last.